So once again, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to an evening with WESCU'S and Dr. Dianne Douglas, the incomparable Dr. Dianne Douglas. Doc, we welcome you this evening. Thank you for being with us.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much, Mr. Ferret.
Thank you. And as we get into this evening's session, I just quickly want to quote a phrase, Doc, that encapsulates exactly what we are going to do this evening. And it's from one of my favorite books, The Secret. So as I sat and I was preparing for today, it asks the questions: do you ever get upset? Get stressed? And the answer is yes, sometimes we do. Actually, at this moment, I'm quite sure that a lot of us here are even angry at God for putting us in the midst of this pandemic. Do we get stressed? Yes, of course we get stressed because of both the domestic and global labor market being adversely affected by COVID, which includes layoff, reduction in salary, reduction in hours. And all of this began while we were on the lockdown. So do we feel anxious, offended, or hurt? Even feel sad or down in the dumps, or despondent? Are you ever unhappy or in a bad mood? If you experience any of these emotions at any time, then you need to know that there's another way. And that is why I think we are here this evening, Doc, to learn the other ways in which we can cope amidst the midst of uncertainty. What do you think about that, Doc?
Yes, I agree. I agree with that quite a bit. That our time here together would be to talk about our mental and emotional well-being. And it is hoped that out of our talk today, that people will find maybe added strength, maybe peace, and certainly hope in the midst of the storm. Yes?
So, Doc, as we get into some questions, and that I am quite sure is on everybody's minds, Doc, what is mental health or mental illness? We
And
seem to talk about it so often, but do we really understand what is mental health and mental illness?
okay. At the very beginning, Mark, I forgot to say thank you to the Western United Credit Union for having me here today. I really appreciate the kind invitation. I want you to know that I was on time, but on the wrong link. So I am just sitting, watching the video, enjoying it, not realizing that I was supposed to be on another link, so you didn't see me. So
Yeah.
I do want to apologize for that. But I love the definition on mental health that is given by the World Health Organization. I think it's such a fantastic definition, and I often use it when we're talking about mental health. So let me just
Yes.
read what is their definition. And it says, a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. Yes. So
Yes.
that is the definition. And Mark, we are getting some feedback that some people are not hearing us, that they need the volume up a little bit. So I
Okay.
don't know if you would like to do that. Yes?
Sure, sure, Doc. We will work on that immediately.
Mhm.
Great. You may continue, Doc. I
Yes,
just got a signal that all is well.
right. So I just gave the definition of mental health as you asked, Mark. Is there anything else you wanted to ask after that definition?
Yes. So everyone in the world was going along, minding their own business. Um, Certainly not at times adhering to what life is prompting them to do in terms of maybe securing their mental well-being, in terms of securing a better financially stable environment. And then at the beginning of 2020, COVID presented itself and really threw us through a loop. And to date, there are some people truly having great difficulties in coping within this environment. So, what are some of the signs of someone suffering from or experiencing mental health?
Okay.
And how do you, as a friend or a family member, lend support in helping that person to cope, especially in such a time like this?
Okay. So mental health, based on the definition that I just shared, has to do with some key issues, all right? So most of the times when we know someone is mentally healthy, we can't look inside of their brain to know what's going on. What we look at is their outer behavior. So we look at what people are doing, and from that, we make a decision as to whether they seem within normal range or not. So we look at things like the context, all right? So, for example, in our country, there is this love of carnival, and it is part of the culture. And people do some interesting things at carnival time that many people would look at and say, that looking like mental illness. You know, some people might say that. But when it happens on a certain Monday and a certain Tuesday, they might put it in the range of normal.
Yes.
If a person should behave that way suddenly, come out of nowhere, jumping along the streets in a costume on, let us say, in August or something like that, you would find that people will say that is not normal. So
Yes.
one of the things you look at is the outer behavior and the context of the behavior. All right. You
Yes.
also want to look at, we talk about age, whether the behavior is age appropriate. Yes. So we're looking at the context. We look at what we believe is age appropriate. Yes. And so we are looking specifically at behavior, what the person is doing. And it also might be what the person is saying as well. All right? All that is in the context of our behavior. So if we're talking with someone and their speech is very pressured, when they're talking very pressured, right? We would know that that is not within normal range, right?
Yes.
If we ask a question, for example, if we say, "How are you today?" and the response is, "The sky is blue," then we know something is wrong because the person is not responding in an expected way to a normal question. All right? And then we also would look at movement, how the person is moving. So is it that they are moving very rapidly? You wake up in the middle of the night and somebody is just pacing, or something like that. You would know then that something is wrong. So all these are indicators that things are not within normal range. And usually we don't look on the inside of someone's mind because we can't see it. But what we look at is their outer behavior. All right, so that will give us an idea. Now, I would like to add to that the whole issue of how, when these things happen, do you first assume that it is mental illness or that it is mental ill health? Yes. Now, if the context does not fit, that is an indicator that something might be wrong. So if I come here today and I start weeping profusely, and you know that maybe I experienced or got the news of the death of a loved one, you will say that's appropriate behavior for sadness. But if I weep profusely most days, there is no real reason why that is happening, then we would recognize that something is not correct. So you would find that for us as psychologists, we spend a lot of time thinking what's in normal range, and then therefore what's outside of normal range of behavior and speech, etc. And then we are able to put it together and we recognize this person might be experiencing mental ill health. You see? And so once we determine that, I hear you asking the question, what do you do if that's happening to a family member? But
Yes.
before we go to the family member, I think it's important for us to ask ourselves, what do we do if it's happening to us?
Us.
Yes. And
Yes.
Mark, what we have found very often is that when it comes to our mental and our emotional well-being, we do not have any training in that area. So let me explain what I mean. We teach little children very early, you must brush your teeth in the morning when you get up most of the times, and in the night before you go to bed. So we are teaching children very basic and good dental hygiene. And we might also teach children that you must take a bath every day, yes, to cleanse yourself, right? Because that helps you in your physical health. And we talk about exercise and sport and all these different things. But when it comes to mental and emotional well-being, we don't always teach what is important. We don't teach what are those building blocks of mental and emotional well-being that is important for the human being for everyday life, right? So what happens is that when we start to talk about mental health, people start to think taboo. This is something for mad people. And then we like to use the word vagrant, which is a very
Yes.
derogatory term, the vagrant on the street or something like that. But we do not teach the basic building blocks of mental and emotional well-being. So what happens is, as Trinbagonians, we find ourselves always in a state where it is a kind of foreign language to us, or a foreign concept to us, or something that is taboo or has stigma. And so what I am hoping from this wonderful forum that you're providing today, that we realize that the same way the body can get sick, the same way the brain or the mind can get ill as well. You see? So that it is just a normal part of life. And we have to take care of it the same way we have to take care of our bodies. Yes?
So what I'm hearing you saying, Doc, is that there is no shame in saying that I am feeling unwell mentally. Because what I think happens to us as human beings is when we try to hide exactly how we feel and try to balance and cope with it for ourselves, that is when things really start to spiral out of control. And we as friends and families, we as an individual must understand there is no shame if I am feeling sad, if I'm feeling depressed, if I am feeling cornered, out of control because of COVID-19 or whatever other situation we might be experiencing. And just to add to what you were saying, sometimes we need to pay attention, particularly to what people are not saying as well. I
Well,
might be a very talkative person and I may just
yes,
go into a shell and not saying anything at all.
yes.
Do you say that we should pay particular attention to that as well?
Definitely. And I think for us, as a people, we don't often have the language to be able to talk about what's happening with us. So you ask someone how they feel, and they tell you what they think. I feel
Wonderful.
like I should, yes, I feel like I should go down the road, or I feel like so. But what they're really saying is, I am thinking this. And
Yes.
so sometimes we don't give the feeling words from when we are children. What do you feel? And we don't say, with the feeling, we don't say things like, I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel depressed, I feel stressed, or whatever. What we often do is we give children licks for if they're not feeling a certain way. And we
Yes.
will say to them, you want me to give you something, to cry for? So what we have done is we have said based on how we raise our children, and therefore what we take with us through adulthood, we are
Yes.
saying things like, you know what? Certain feelings are not supposed to be felt. And if you feel it, and I don't agree that you should feel that, then you're going to be punished for it. So if we start out with that, then it becomes very difficult for us as adults to be able to talk about what we feel. And we even see it as we do it at funerals. If someone is weeping at a funeral over the death of a loved one, there's always somebody in the funeral will come hit you on your back, pat you and say, don't cry, don't cry. You hear, don't cry, these are the things we do. So what happens is that our mental and emotional issues, we disconnect from it. We disconnect from it. And for years, we were also taught that if you want to survive in life, you have to be able to deal with the pecan that people give. So people should be able to tell you anything hurtful, and you are supposed to be able to take it as a true sign of maturity, So all of us got certain nicknames, if your ears big, they call in your elephant ears,
Yes.
or they tell you something about your nose, your eyes, your this, your that. And people will have feelings about that. But if you show it, then most likely you're going to be teased even further. So you learn to suppress it. So we're looking at some very basic things. Added to that, a global crisis called COVID-19. And you will understand that we are starting from way back.
Yes.
We are starting as if we are the ones with heavy shoes on when the race has taken off, because we do not have the building blocks to be able to assist us to even express fully what we are feeling. So let me give an example. When we talk about mental health, people think it is, they immediately start to think of St. Anne's Psychiatric Hospital, right? But mental health has to do with things like, and we've all felt it, we've all felt depressed at some point in our lives,
Yes.
And depression has to do with a cluster of things. Depression has to do with where you feel really sad and discouraged. And we may have felt that way because of maybe an exam result, or because of news of our health, or some kind of rejection that we have received, and we feel very sad and very discouraged. Depression can also be when we feel really angry, but we can't express it. We have to shove it down. We have to hold it in. And so sometimes we talk about depression as anger turned inwards, where we feel so angry and we turn it inward because there is no place to really express it safely. Yes? And so what that does, it pulls down our psyche, so to speak. We feel like if a weight is on us, and we walk around feeling this weight. So when we feel those things in depression, we start to withdraw from people. We don't want to really mingle and mix because of how we are feeling. Guess what? In order to be socially engaging, it takes energy to be able to do that. So when you feel this weight on you, you need energy to carry that weight. Therefore, you don't have the energy to be able to engage with others. So you start to withdraw. You see, you want to be left alone. And for some people, being left alone will include that things are so heavy that they cannot get out of bed in the morning. Yes? So when we're talking about depression, for example, as a basic mental ill health occurrence that everybody feels at some point in time. If you've never been depressed, Mark, it means something is wrong with you. You see, something is wrong with you. If in the human experience, you've
Yes.
never been depressed. But what we also do is we start to talk about severity or range, right? So like with something like depression, we will talk about whether it's mild depression, which is what most of us would have experienced in life. And then we will talk about moderate. And then we can talk about whether it is severe. So we are looking at the chronicity of the illness, yes? And so we will know based on whether it's mild, moderate, or severe, for example, how we need to intervene to be able to assist someone at that point in time. You see? So
And
we would look at the duration of it. How long did it last? We would look at how the depth of it, you know, the depth of your feeling. We would look at what was normal for you before, and we will compare it to how you are now. And so then we would know what kind of treatment might be required for it. Yes? Mhm.
and what about those of us, Doc, who has children and their children are experiencing depression? How do you, as a parent, help your child or your children to cope and to come out of these depressed states?
Right.
Because
I think,
they too
mhm,
are experiencing the adverse effects of the pandemic as well.
mhm.
I have even heard that there are some young children who may have even attempted to commit suicide or committed suicide. How do we help our children to cope?
Mhm. Uh, you see, Mark, we have to put some building blocks in place in order to answer the question. Yes? And
Yes,
so let me put some building blocks in place first. All right? So we are recognizing that as Trinbagonians, we do not have sometimes the language to speak about what we feel. And we sometimes don't even understand ourselves enough to understand what is normal. All right? So the thing is that there has to be a, a period of self-awareness, because you see, for a parent to help a child, that parent has to be aware of themselves as well,
yes.
aware of their own mental health and well-being. Yes, that's going to be very important. So the parent who is in tune with themselves and then also in tune with their children, would recognize that something is wrong because this child is not behaving typically the way they would. All right? Yes? And so I want to talk macro and micro for a little bit. All right?
Sure.
So we need to be in touch with ourselves in order to be in touch with our children. We need to know when we feel well or when we don't feel well in order to recognize certain signs in our children. So we need to be very present emotionally and mentally and connected with our children in order to understand what they are going through. All right? And that is just whether there's a pandemic or not. When you add a pandemic to that, right, you are talking now about the child being in the context of a home, all right? And the home has become a place where there are huge expectations now for home, because home is now the office, and home is now the school, and
Yes.
home is now the doubles, where you get doubles, because you can't get it outside. They have to get it at home. You see?
Yes.
And home is this, and home is that, and home is the other. And so we are being asked to stay at home, and our home now has to provide for us everything, right? And that is one of the shockers that we have to deal with. With the restrictions, we cannot go out too much to get anything or find a solution to things. It has to happen in the home. So it's going to be important that we as parents or as the adults or the ones in charge of the home, that we take stock, and we have to now build a different platform on which the family rests, because we are now in a situation that is completely different from anything that we ever dealt with before, right? So it means that in order to help our children, right, then it is going to be important that the adults in the home stop. You have to stop when a pandemic hits. You can't just keep going like the Energizer bunny. You have to stop and take stock. And the stock that we're going to take is this, that the home is not the same place it was before. All right? And now we are going to be in a confined area. We are going to have to live with each other all the time, right? We have to be in each other's space 24/7, etc. All right? If we don't stop and take stock of that, we are going to build something that is not going to be relevant to our current COVID situation. All right? So we are not going to be able to build that. So it's going to be very important we take stock, all right, of what's happening around us, and we have to make some decisions, new decisions, in order for our home to function right. And one of the things
If I
we
may
talk
interject, um, please forgive me. What about a parent or parents in attempting with the healing process, this new change within the household? instead of trying to put the front of being brave and everything is together, do you think it wise as the leader of the household to let your children see your vulnerability and to let them know that daddy or mommy is experiencing some of the same fears that you are experiencing, and maybe that may help the child to cope as well?
Yes. You see, Mark, the thing is that that is very, very important to do. Very important to do. And that is another building block that you're going to put in. Yes. You see, when we are
Okay.
moving really fast from day to day, in and out, there is a lot that we don't attend to in our homes, in our connection to one another, in our interpersonal relationships. And then it becomes easier to hide what we feel because we're in and out. But when we have to share a space together 24/7, you have to then become very honest about what you feel. And you see, Mark, we need to understand that not every home is a sanctuary. Not
Yes.
every situation is something that is a calm experience that we are having and we let the children in, etc. And that's why I was talking about building something new,
Yes.
because in order to get the home to function right, the adults might need to have to sit and ask each other forgiveness for things that have been, building for years. You know, they have to talk about trust and all these sorts of things. There might be abuse or violence in the home. So you might have to address that as well, what you're going to do for safety. But whatever it is, you have to stop and take stock. And when you stop and take stock, we sometimes talk about having a family meeting where you sit in a family meeting and you talk through what people are experiencing because of the pandemic. How do you feel about not being in school? You can ask a child. How do you, mom, dad, how you feel about working from home or having to leave us and go out and do things in the midst of a pandemic? How do we feel about death and dying, and these sorts of things? And so in that family meeting, which should not happen once in a while, but consistently, maybe once a week, that it is part of now the routine. You sit and you talk about what's happening. You see, when you build that, it becomes easier to be able to reach out to a child. You see? Because now there is a habit in the family of not only do the adults truly express what they feel and recognize that tears and worry is not something to be afraid of, but also I am being heard about what is bothering me as a child. You see, sometimes we think as adults that we can help children without having built a relationship with them,
Quite true.
without, without providing safety for them to share their feelings. All of us know the experience about I'll give you licks, you want something to cry for. But you see, if we're going to use that approach in COVID, then it will be very, very difficult to be able to allow a child a safe space to talk about what they feel. And I know a lot of parents too are concerned about motivating children with school and online and all these different things. But the motivation starts off with a connection to the parent that is a safe space first of all. A safe space where you could talk about how your world has suddenly changed and
Yes.
gone upside down, and where are my friends, and different things like that, so that there's a safe space to express the frustration. And then sometimes in that safe space, a hug or a reassurance or a soft tone will go a long way in causing healing. Yes? But you see, even in that too, we must have some structure as well. So that in order to motivate a child around school and all these things, it's going to be important that you have structure. So not because the school is a laptop away or a phone away, that the child rolls out of the bed just before school starts, press a button. They didn't shower, they didn't change, they did not brush their teeth, they did not have breakfast because it's right there. That is not going to assist in motivating, you see? So
Yes.
you have to have that structure still in place so that the child's mental and emotional well-being will be massaged, you see, so that they will be able to engage in that way. Yes?
Doc, just for a brief moment, I would like to go to a commercial break and we'll come right back.
Okay, will do.
Thank
Mhm.
you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back very soon.
Welcome to the Future of Banking with Western United Credit Union Mobile Banking. Now you can view your account activity, transfer funds, pay loans, and much, much more. After you've downloaded the app from Google Play, you're now ready to register your account. Click the register button. Complete all the fields of the registration screen. Keep in mind, your member account number can be either 8 or 11 digits. Welcome to the Future of Banking with Western United Credit Union Mobile Banking. Now you can view your account activity, transfer funds, pay loans, and much, much more. After you've downloaded the app from Google Play, you're now ready to register your account. Click the register button. Complete all the fields of the registration screen. Keep in mind, your member account number can be either 8 or 11 digits. Note, you must have 2 forms of ID and your password must be at least 5 characters and no more than 32, with at least 1 uppercase letter, 1 lowercase letter, and 1 numeric digit. Now that you're all registered, you're ready to sign in to a mobile banking account. Click the link in the sign in button to enter the email address and password you used during the registration process. Then click Login. After logging in, let's start by checking your account balances. Click the Check Balance button. To the top of the screen, use the left and right arrows to scroll through your account types to view a list of all your accounts. For details, simply click on the account you'd like to view. You can also click on the calendar icon to view the account details by period. Now, let's transfer funds between two products within your account. By clicking the Transfer to My Account button, you can choose the two products you'd like to transfer between. Manually enter the amount to transfer or simply select any of the preset dollar values on the screen and click Submit. Review and click Confirm to complete the transfer. Make your monthly loan payment by clicking the Pay Loans button. Click the Pay My Loan button and select the account from which to withdraw the funds and choose the loan you'd like to pay. Manually enter the amount.
The Family Indemnity Plan provides the comfort of knowing your family will be cared for, so you can enjoy mom's macaroni pie or dad's special barbecue sauce. An insurance plan that gives you peace of mind, covering you and 5 of your loved ones for only 1 monthly premium. The Family Indemnity Plan allows you to choose the right plan for your family. Contact your credit union today.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. And for those of you now joining us, this is an evening with Dr. Dianne Douglas and WESCU'S. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Dr. Douglas, the floor is yours once again. Thank you so much.
Yes. We were talking before we went to break about that family meeting, that opportunity to be able to,
If I may just ask you to stick a pin, I just saw someone said that it is very soft, so maybe we can get some more volume.
Okay.
Maybe it's on our end.
All right.
Yes.
And maybe they could give some feedback.
Or they're saying that it is better now.
All right. Okay,
Okay,
so maybe
great.
it was on your end. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. Yes. So we were talking before the break
Yes.
about this issue of relationship with children so that they will find a safe space to be able to talk with us about what they feel. And we were talking about the fact that it would be important to have structure in the home around school in order for that to be a foundation for their mental and emotional well-being. So we wouldn't want them to kind of roll out of bed and press the button and start school without having had a shower, without having had maybe a little exercise, breakfast, brush teeth, etc. And then we would want to have a section of the home put aside for school, yes? So what would happen is that because now the home is school, what we would want to do is to say whether from 8 to 2, the kitchen table is the classroom. Or if you have a larger home, a particular room becomes the classroom during those hours. And you can talk with your children at the family meeting about your expectations around school.
And
so
I am glad to hear you use the word expectation. So should the parents change their expectations of their school-age children with grades, etc.? In terms of what you expect of them as a child, now having to adapt to this new environment of learning from home, which seems to be very challenging for most children. So
Yes.
should a parent change their expectation a bit, not dropping the standard, but change your expectation and being more lenient and more compassionate as you help them to transition?
Well, I think one of the things that should happen is that you have to redefine what your standard is.
Yes.
You know, is the standard a good grade, or is the standard my child adjusting in such a way that their mental and emotional well-being is not compromised? You see? So before we had a very narrow view of what the standard was, or maybe what success is. And now, as we build a new platform for them to be able to function, one of the things we would want to adjust as parents is what is our standard now? All right, yes? So that once we adjust that and we say, okay, one standard I would have is that I would talk with my child about school. Another standard I would have is to check in with my child about how they are dealing with school. Another standard I would have is that I would want there to be support for my child around school. Another standard might be I would make sure as best I can that they have a working device to be able to deal with school, and that device will be dedicated to the work of school. You see? So maybe what you want to do is not just focus only on the outcome, but you want to be able to focus on the process along the way, so that what you're teaching your child or walking alongside your child with is how to deal with change, how to deal with change in a calm way, how to deal with change without putting yourself in a place for mental ill health. And then after that, you incrementally look at the outcome. So you see, okay, maybe they started off at one particular level with the outcome, maybe a grade, but oh my gosh, they got a little better. And so you want to encourage them every time they make things incrementally better. You want to be able to encourage them until they are at a standard that you think is great for their grades and so forth. But if the opposite starts to happen and the child is not getting incrementally better, but what has happened is that there is a huge dip, the last thing you want to do is just get on their case and feel that the old way just hit 2 ball, 2 shout, 2 licks, 2 whatever, and it's going to fix itself. Now, we want to also mature in what we do as well. So you would want to check, are they getting up on time, right? Are they bathed and ready? Do they put on clean clothes before? Are they seated in the classroom conditions, meaning that on a chair, at a desk, or a table, instead of lying down in the bed, all right? Or upside down, their legs on top the bed and their head on the floor,
Yes.
and things like that. All these things contribute to a child's mental and emotional well-being, you see? And so you would want to check that all those things are in place. Are they having breakfast in the morning, etc.? Did they have any exercise at all? Whatever yard space there is to be able to walk in the yard, that is allowed during COVID. It is outside the parameters of the yard that is the
Yes.
problem. So are they getting any sunshine, etc.? And do they have opportunity to connect with their friends, even if it is the online way of connecting. You see? So when you start to look at those building blocks, you'll be able to see which block is out of place so that you'll be able to assist. If it is the child is an extrovert like me and likes to connect with people, one of the things they might be really upset about the loss of those friendships. And you would want to hug, you would want to reassure, you would want to talk to them about a different way of connecting. Maybe they play video games together or something, and you do not see play as something that is unnecessary in a child's life. You will see that as important. And then what you could also do is say, don't worry, we will play some things together. And all those table games that gathering dust somewhere, you can
Yes.
bring out and engage. You see, sometimes we think, Mark, that it is something huge that we have to do or something huge that is going on. Sometimes it is a matter of looking at the building blocks of mental and emotional well-being and see if all the blocks are in place. Yes? And
Yes.
then as a parent, you would want to be able to put the blocks in place that might be missing.
So I realized now that we are running out of time. I know there are a lot more questions, and we have another session in June. So we would save some of those questions for then. But
Yes.
before we come to a close, I want to turn the attention more on the adults again, and especially our teachers, because I have some friends who are teachers, and I know they themselves are experiencing a lot of hardship in dealing with, or let me not use the word hardship, but more a challenging period with the Zoom classroom, all of what is expected of them. And sometimes parents really, really expect a lot more from Miss and from Sir. And we have the essential workers who are risking their lives to keep the economy going, to keep us happy and safe. So we have those working in the supermarkets. We have those who are the sanitation workers. We have those who work in credit unions and other cooperatives, and the bank, the police officers, the nurses, the doctors. And now we are hearing that COVID is affecting very adversely the health systems now, because we are hearing a lot of nurses and doctors becoming infected and even dying. Doc, how do we remain strong? How do we remain calm? How do we remain trusting and confident? Trying to grapple and to understand that things can and will get better. What do we have to say to our essential workers? What do we have to say to our teachers?
Yes, Mark, that is a very loaded question. And you have touched on so many different groups. But let us see if we could talk to all as best we can. Yes? One of the things we have noted as psychologists when there is a crisis is that we must stop and assess the situation. Yes, we have to stop. We might think, Mark, that if we just keep going, that we are doing a world of good to everyone. Nothing could be further from the truth. All right? So when a crisis occurs, we have to stop and we have to take stock of us. And in doing that, we have to be anchored somewhere when we do that. We have to have an anchor. For me, my anchor has a lot to do with my faith in God. That is my anchor. All right? Yes? And so it is very important that you are anchored somewhere when there is a storm. And that anchor has to be usually shaped from before. But even if it isn't shaped from before, you can shape it at that current time as well. You can make that decision. So you have to stop, you have to take stock, and you have to be anchored. But then there's another part, and that is you have to make a decision. You see, if we don't decide whether we are going to survive and then thrive, it becomes very difficult to do so. So when you stop, you are stopping to make a decision about what you are going to do or how you are going to be in this. And a good decision to always make is a decision to survive. I am going to survive, as well as I am going to thrive. And I'm not just making this up. When research was done looking at huge crises, whether it was the world wars, whether it was the Holocaust, whether it was slavery, one of the things they noted for the persons who survived, that they made a decision. So you take stock of what's happening. You must stop in order to do that. You must have an anchor in order to be able to survive. And then you have to make a decision, not just to survive, but also thrive. As you get that part in order, the next thing you recognize is that now it is going to be a different game plan. It can't be the old one, you see? It has to be a different one. And so you have to make decisions about your day, your life, your future, etc. And so as you deal with what's happening before you, you would find that once the internal, a lot of work has been done there, you find you start to build capacity to be able to deal with what's happening on the outside. I think it's so important for us to recognize that we cannot neglect self if we are going to be able to function. And I think it would really be important too on the macro level that when we are dealing with school, when we are dealing with hospitals, when we are dealing with people who are at the forefront the military, etc. The people, there must be a rotation of persons. It cannot be the same people doing everything all the time. There has to be a rotation. And a good rotation will involve rest for one group while the next group is at the forefront. And it is going to be the same principle when we are dealing also with home. It would be important to have that downtime for everyone for rest and replenishment before we start going again. We tend to like when people spread themselves really thin and sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice all the time. But we have to have a paradigm shift. And in the paradigm shift, we have to understand the importance of the replenishment of rest. So one group working while the next group resting. Then this group comes out to deal with the next group, etc. And the importance too for the frontline workers for those family meetings. Because if the home is not a sanctuary for the frontline workers where they are replenished, it becomes very difficult to build capacity to keep going. So you would want buy-in from your family for what you are doing as you sacrifice out there. If you don't get that buy-in, it becomes constant conflict, and that is not going to assist our frontline workers.
Thank you so much, Doc. And before we come to the end of our program this evening, we invited our brothers and sisters from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I have no idea whether they are on or not, but I want us, Doc, to give them a sense of hope, because I think that that is one of the ways that we would gain the strength and determination that we need to have some expectation for a brighter tomorrow. So our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, just like us here in Trinidad and Tobago, was battling with COVID-19. And then in addition to that, now came the eruption of the volcano. And in the middle of that, so you're dealing with COVID-19, then you're dealing with the eruption of the, then you had to deal with severe flooding. Doc, how do you deal with all that catastrophe one after the other? So when you think that, okay, maybe we are getting some kind of ease, there is something else popping up again. So there is more confusion. And I can even maybe dare say there is now the instability of the home, because you mentioned it before that some homes aren't sanctuaries that I can go to for that peace, for that restoration. Before we come to what do we tell our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the little nuggets of preserving their well-being?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I would say, Mark, that we have a saying when we deal with addictions, and it is going to be the same thing now, one day at a time.
A time.
Yes? When we are dealing with crisis, crisis means that it keeps coming in front of your face all the time, that it is something that is right here. So you can't think about the future. You can't think too far ahead because that is going to take unnecessary energy that you don't want to waste. And so you have to take life now in moments and in blocks at a time, right? So one moment at a time, 1 second sometime at a time,
At a time.
1 day at a time. And so you have to shrink it to that moment, all right? And in each moment, you deal with what's before you, not what you wish, not what you would like, but what's before you in that moment, right? And the other thing is that when we look at resilience, that ability to buoy back up in the midst of turmoil. You know, it's like the cork bobbing on the ocean. There's a storm and the cork goes down but comes back up again and is able to
Yes.
stay resilient. We recognize that that ability to stay focused on what is important in the current is going to be critical. At that point, you're not going to worry too much about what people think of you, your latest hairstyle, how your makeup looking, or anything of the sort. What you're thinking of is the grit that is involved for survival at that
Yes.
moment. And that focus of, I have made a decision that I am going to survive this 1 day at a time, 1 moment at a time. And I am going to come out of this and I am going to thrive. Remembering again, Mark, it's the same thing. You must be anchored somewhere, right?
Yes.
You must have a purpose in order to keep going. For me, my anchor is my faith in God, and my purpose is what He has called me to do at this point in time. Mark, the last thing I want to say is this, as I give
Yes.
hope, is this. I have a belief, Mark, that if I exist at this point in history, this history that has never happened before, where there is a global pandemic, that I have what it takes to survive. Yes?
Yes.
So I want to believe that if I exist in this point in time, it means then that I have something that allowed me to be here at this point. Of course, I will go to my faith in God, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so the thing is that in this moment, we get to make history. There is nobody to look at. There is nobody to ask what to do. We get to make the rules because this has not happened ever before. So now we are going to get an opportunity to chart a course, you see, where
Yes.
we someday will be able to say, this is what you do to be resilient in the midst of a pandemic. So I am hoping that our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as one thing after the other to hold on one day at a time. If you exist at this point in history, you have what it takes.
Wow. Thank you so much, Doc. This has been a very, very interesting, dynamic, and fruitful evening. And I can't wait for part 2. And part 2, we will get in about the finances as well as we continue with our questions. To give the closing remarks, I now want to ask one of our directors, Mr. Dionisio Salazar, to bring the closing remarks.
Hi, good evening. Mark Ferret, President of Western United Credit Union Cooperative Society, or commonly referred to as WESCU. Our respected and featured speaker, Dr. Dianne Douglas, members of the board of directors, members of various committees, management and staff members of WESCU, and our online guests. I am Dionisio Salazar, and it is my privilege to offer the vote of thanks. I wish to thank Dr. Douglas for her insightful presentation on mental health and your finances. Today's environment has presented entrepreneurs, small, medium-sized enterprises, and organizations with unprecedented challenges. However, at the core of these entities are individuals. The forum commenced with the definition of mental health as ascribed by the World Health Organization, and then contextualize culture, behavior, movement that suggests signs of instability. The discussion went on to highlight how behavior, movement, and actions are usually in alignment. The forum then focused on how mental health and well-being are important, and the gap between what should be taught and how we as a society address issues attributed to mental health. Moreover, it highlighted that we as a society needed to be more aware and prepared to assist members. The disconnect between our societal acceptable behavior and our emotions was addressed. Our society doesn't appear to be prepared to address the issues associated with COVID-19 pandemic, as we are disadvantaged by not having conditioned our citizens to address psychological issues effectively and safely, which is something that you're focused on. I gleaned that we need to identify the building blocks to develop a strong foundation psychologically so as to make conscious decisions about how we function in this type of environment in particular. The manner in which we as a society were conditioned and how we exhibit mental health issues was discussed expertly. Our need to create a safe place for addressing issues is paramount. Additionally, being anchored is a great place to start. I took note of that. The examples provided in this webinar can be easily identified by attendees, and I trust that the knowledge gained would be imbibed and shared. I especially like the webinar that focused on how we individuals should be cognizant about the changes affecting us, and with specific reference to our home and the COVID-19 pandemic situations, with us working at home and having school at home and managing our children and our situations at home. I wish to acknowledge the astuteness of our president, Mr. Mark Ferret, for this timely webinar to aid the stakeholders of WESCU, notably our members. The efforts of the board and management of WESCU are focused on ensuring that our members are guided during this time of uncertainty, and that the efforts of wealth generation and creation are core in the decisions being made. So in light of what was discussed, I took note of the fact that, being grounded, being anchored, and creating that space for us to have those meaningful discussions. I took note of that, and I felt that WESCU offered that safe space. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. And I hope that you all adhere to the guidelines. And to our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent, I wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Denisio. And as we come to a close of our webinar, Doc, I want to thank you so very much, both you and your team, for a very enlightening evening, for all the nuggets that you would have shared. Thank you so much once again, Doc, for sharing your anointing. You know I'm your biggest fan, right? You know that. So I don't know if you wanted to share one last word, Doc, and then we will just wrap up.
I think that was a good last word, Mark, about
Wonderful.
you being a good fan. Bless your heart.
Wonderful. So people, we thank you for your time. And I just want to leave these words with you all. Doc said that, in my own words, that we should choose our attitude. So let us think it. Let us speak it. And let us live it. Let us live our best selves and what we desire to see within ourselves, within our households, within our nation. Let us think on those positive things. And as we think on them, they will present themselves to us. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been an evening with Dr. Dianne Douglas and WESCU. Thank you for your time. And we will certainly be together once again next month.